Kyle Martinez kicked at the loose dirt with his worn boot. The red dust of New Terra Colony stuck to everything, making the whole place look like a giant rust bucket. He hated this planet. He hated the smell of the recycled air from the dome. Generators. He hated the way the twin suns made everything too bright during the day and too cold at night. Most of all, he hated that his family had lost everything and ended up here. The spaceport buzzed with activity around him. Cargo haulers moved heavy containers from the landing pads to the warehouses. Colonists hurried back and forth, some heading to work in the mines, others trying to make deals for supplies from the trader ships. Everyone seemed to have somewhere important to go, except Kyle. He watched a sleek passenger liner lift off from Pad 7, its engines glowing blue as it climbed toward the stars. Rich people going somewhere better, he thought. People who never had to worry about losing their farm to corporate raiders or starting over with nothing on some backwater colony world. The anger burned in his chest like acid. It had been eating at him for months now, ever since they arrived on New Terra. Back on Greenfield Colony, his family had owned 200 acres of the best farmland in the sector. They grew corn and wheat that fed 3 different systems. Kyle had been proud of that farm. He had planned to take it over from his father someday. Then Stellar Agriculture Corporation decided they wanted the land. They made an offer that was far too low. When Kyle's father refused to sell, strange things started happening. Equipment broke down. Shipments got lost in transit. The local bank suddenly called in loans that had been fine for years. Within 6 months, the Martinez family was bankrupt and homeless. Kyle clenched his fists. The corporations always won. They had lawyers and credits and connections. Regular people like his family never had a chance. It was not fair. Nothing was fair anymore. A soft whimper caught his attention. Near the edge of the spaceport, by the chain-link fence that separated the landing area from the colony proper, a small brown dog was digging through a pile of garbage. The animal was thin and dirty, probably one of the strays that survived by eating scraps from the food vendors. Kyle felt the anger spike again. Here was something even more pathetic than his own situation. At least he had a roof over his head in the colony housing units. This stupid dog had nothing and would never have anything. It would spend its whole miserable life scrounging for garbage until it died alone and forgotten. The dog looked up at Kyle with big brown eyes. Its tail wagged hopefully, as if Kyle might have food or show it some kindness. The hopeful expression made Kyle's anger worse. How could something be so stupid? How could it still hope for good things when the universe clearly did not care? "Get away from me," Kyle muttered, taking steps toward the dog. The animal's tail wagged faster. It thought Kyle was being friendly. It started walking toward him, probably thinking this human might pet it or give it something to eat. The dog's trust made Kyle feel sick. It reminded him of how his family had trusted that hard work and honesty would be enough to keep their farm. They had been just as stupid as this animal. Kyle drew his foot back. "I said get away." He kicked hard at the dog's ribs. His boot connected with a dull thud, and the animal yelped in pain and surprise. It stumbled backward, looking confused and hurt. The trust in its eyes turned to fear, but it still did not run away. It just crouched low to the ground, trembling. The sight should have made Kyle feel better. He had wanted to hurt something, to make something else feel as powerless as he did. But instead, he felt empty. The dog was not his real enemy. Hurting. It would not bring back his family's farm or make the universe more fair. He raised his foot again anyway. Maybe if he kicked it harder, maybe if he really hurt it, he might feel something other than this terrible emptiness inside his chest. "That's not how we treat innocent creatures, son." The voice came from directly behind Kyle, quiet but carrying clearly over the noise of the spaceport. Kyle froze with his boot still raised. He had been so focused on the dog that he had not heard anyone approach. Kyle spun around, ready to tell whoever it was to mind their own business. The words died in his throat when he saw the man standing there. The stranger was tall and lean, maybe in his 40s, with dark hair and kind eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore a long brown coat that had seen better days and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never been afraid of anything. There was something about his presence that made Kyle take an involuntary step backward. "I was just ... Kyle started to say, but the words sounded weak even to himself. The man did not look angry. He did not lecture Kyle or threaten him. Instead, he moved past Kyle and knelt down beside the injured dog. His movements were careful and gentle as he checked the animal for damage. "Easy there, buddy," the man said softly to the dog. "Let me take a look at you." The dog was still trembling, but it allowed the stranger to examine it. The man's hands moved with practiced skill, checking for broken ribs or internal injuries. Kyle watched, feeling more uncomfortable by the second. "He'll be okay," the man said, still focused on the dog. "Bruised, but nothing broken. You're tougher than you look, aren't you, boy?" The dog's tail gave a tentative wag. Something about the stranger's voice seemed to calm it down. Kyle had never seen an animal respond to someone so quickly. The man stood up and finally looked at Kyle directly. His eyes were not angry, but they were not friendly either. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much of the universe's cruelty and had decided to do something about it. "Rough day?" the man asked. Kyle felt his anger flare again. "You don't know anything about my day." "Maybe not," the man agreed. "But I know something about feeling angry at the world. About wanting to hurt something because you're hurting inside." Kyle stared at him. How could this stranger possibly understand what Kyle was going through? The man knelt down again and scratched behind the dog's ears. The animal leaned into his touch, finally starting to relax. "The thing is," the man continued, "hurting innocent creatures never makes the real pain go away. It just adds more pain to the universe. And there's already plenty of that to go around." Kyle wanted to argue, but something about the man's quiet certainty made him hesitate. There was something different about this stranger, something that made Kyle think he might actually know what he was talking about. The sound of emergency sirens suddenly filled the air. The emergency sirens wailed across New Terra Colony like angry metal birds. Kyle had heard these sirens before during monthly drills, but something about the sound was different this time. More urgent. More real. People started running from all directions toward the main plaza. Vendors abandoned their stalls. Workers dropped their tools and hurried away from the loading docks. Even the tough cargo haulers looked worried as they joined the growing crowd. "Come on," the stranger said to Kyle. He scooped up the injured dog with gentle hands. "We should see what this is about." Kyle wanted to tell the man he could handle himself, but curiosity got the better of him. He followed the stranger through the maze of prefab buildings toward the colony's center. The dog seemed content to rest in the man's arms. No longer trembling, the main plaza was already packed with colonists by the time they arrived. Governor Chun stood on the raised platform, normally used for announcements about work shifts and supply deliveries. Her face was pale, and her hands shook as she adjusted the microphone. "Citizens of New Terra Colony," she began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "We have received an emergency transmission from the outer sensor grid. 3 large vessels of unknown origin have entered our system and are approaching our planet." A murmur of fear rippled through the crowd. Kyle felt his stomach tighten. Unknown vessels usually meant trouble for frontier colonies like theirs. "The ships are not responding to our communication attempts," Governor Chun continued. "Colony Defense Command is tracking their approach. We estimate they will reach orbit in approximately 4 hours. An older man near Kyle turned to his neighbor. "Defense Command? We don't have any real defenses." Just some mining lasers and a few security shuttles. Those won't stop real warships, someone else whispered. Kyle looked at the stranger beside him. The man was listening carefully to every word, but he did not seem afraid like everyone else. Instead, he looked thoughtful, as if he was working out a puzzle in his head. "Who are you anyway?" Kyle asked quietly. The man glanced down at him. "Name's John Constantine, and you are?" "Kyle Martinez." Kyle paused, then added, "People seem to know that name." "Constantine, I mean." A woman standing nearby turned around quickly when she heard the name. Her eyes went wide as she stared at John Constantine. "Are you really him, the John Constantine?" More people started to notice. An old man pushed through the crowd to get closer. "It is him," the old man said in amazement. "I saw the documentaries, the interviews from way back. You're supposed to be dead." Kyle looked back and forth between Constantine and the growing group of colonists who were starting to recognize him. "What's going on? Who is this guy?" The old man looked at Kyle as if he could not believe the question. "Son, this is John Constantine. Back on old Earth, before he disappeared, he was one of the most famous people in the world. Movies, charities, philosophy books. But more than that, he walked away from all of it, gave up everything to help people nobody else cared about." Kyle frowned. "I never heard of him." "That's because he made sure you wouldn't," the old man explained. "About 20 years ago, he just vanished. Left behind all the fame and money. People said he went to the outer colonies to help settlers and refugees. Some said he was dead. Others said he became some kind of legend out here in the frontier." Constantine shifted the dog to one arm and placed his free hand on Kyle's shoulder. "The past doesn't matter much," he said quietly. "What matters is what we do right now." But Kyle's mind was spinning. He stared at Constantine with new eyes. This was not just some random stranger who happened to care about animals. This was someone who had chosen to give up everything most people wanted just to help others. "Why?" Kyle asked. "Why would you give up being famous and rich to come out here?" Constantine was quiet for a moment. He looked down at the dog in his arms, then back at Kyle. "You want to know the truth? I was angry once, just like you are now. I had success and money, but I was furious at how unfair everything was. How the powerful could crush the weak whenever they wanted. How good people suffered while bad people prospered." Kyle nodded. That was exactly how he felt. "I could have stayed angry," Constantine continued. "I could have used my fame to complain about injustice from a comfortable distance. But complaining doesn't change anything. Action does. So I decided to go where I could actually make a difference." "But you lost everything," Kyle said. Constantine smiled sadly. "I thought I lost everything. Turns out I found something much more valuable: purpose. The chance to stand between bullies and their victims. The opportunity to show people that someone still cares about doing the right thing." Before Kyle could respond, Governor Chun's voice crackled over the loudspeakers again. "Citizens, we have an update. The approaching vessels have been identified. They are ships of the Zephyrian Empire." The crowd went dead silent. Even Kyle, who was only 16 and had grown up on a farming colony, knew about the Zephyrians. Everyone in human space knew about them. The Zephyrians were an ancient warrior race that controlled dozens of star systems. They were bigger and stronger than humans, with natural armor and reflexes that made them nearly impossible to fight. More importantly, they viewed humans as inferior creatures. In Zephyrian space, humans were slaves, gladiators, or worse. "The Zephyrian commander has sent us a message," Governor Chun continued, her voice breaking slightly. "They claim that all humans in this sector are escaped property of the Empire. They are demanding our immediate surrender." Panic began to spread. Through the crowd, people started shouting questions. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men who worked the dangerous mining operations every day looked terrified. Kyle felt the world spin around him. First, his family had lost everything too. Corporate raiders. Now alien slavers were coming to take away what little freedom they had left. It was like the universe was determined to crush every good thing in his life. He looked at Constantine, expecting to see the same fear in the man's eyes that he saw everywhere else. Instead, Constantine looked calm, almost peaceful. "This is it," Kyle said bitterly. "We're finished. The Zephyrians don't negotiate. They just take what they want." Constantine set the dog down gently on the ground. The animal stayed close to his feet, still trusting him despite everything that had happened. "Maybe," Constantine said thoughtfully. "Or maybe it's time someone showed them that humans are more than they think we are." Kyle stared at him. "What do you mean?" But Constantine was already walking toward the platform where Governor Chun stood. The crowd parted to let him through, whispers following in his wake. Kyle hurried to keep up, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something else he could not quite identify. Hope, maybe. For the first time in months, Kyle felt a tiny spark of hope. Constantine walked through the crowd with steady steps. People moved aside to let him pass, but Kyle could see the fear in their eyes had not gone away. Having a famous person among them was interesting, but it would not stop alien warships. Governor Chun was talking quickly with her advisors when Constantine reached the platform. She looked up as he approached, recognition dawning on her face. "Mr. Constantine, is it really you?" she asked. "Yes, Mom," Constantine replied politely. "I wonder if I might have a word with you about our situation." "Our situation?" "Governor." Chun laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Our situation is hopeless. The Zephyrians have 3 battle cruisers. We have mining equipment and cargo shuttles. They're going to take everyone as slaves, and there's nothing we can do about it." Kyle pushed closer to the platform so he could hear better. Around him, other colonists were doing the same. Everyone wanted to know what the famous John Constantine thought they should do. "May I see the message they sent?" Constantine asked calmly. Governor Chun nodded to one of her advisors, who handed her a data pad. She passed it to Constantine, who read it carefully. His expression did not change as he scrolled through the text. "Interesting," he said finally. "They're following the old protocols." "What protocols?" Governor Chen asked. "Zephyrian Honor Code," Constantine explained. "They're not just taking you as slaves. They're claiming you as escaped property, which means they have to follow certain rules. Rules that include the right of challenge." Kyle had never heard of any honor code, but apparently some of the older colonists had. A man near the platform spoke up. "The right of challenge is just a legend," the man said. "Even if it's real, it would be suicide. No human has ever beaten a Zephyrian warrior in single combat." Constantine looked out at the crowd. Maybe not. But it's still an option. Before anyone could respond, a new sound filled the air. Not sirens this time, but a deep humming noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Kyle looked up and saw 3 massive shapes descending through the clouds. The Zephyrian ships were nothing like the sleek vessels that normally visited New Terra Colony. These were brutal, angular things that looked more like weapons than spacecraft. They were dark metal and sharp edges, built for war and intimidation. The ships settled into a triangular formation above the colony, casting long shadows over the buildings. Kyle could see weapon ports along their hulls, more firepower than the entire colony had ever seen. A new voice boomed across the plaza, speaking in heavily accented English. "Humans of New Terra Colony. I am Commander Vex High of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. You are all escaped property of the Empire. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences." The voice was deep and harsh, full of the confidence that came from never losing a fight. Kyle felt his knees go weak. This was really happening. Aliens who thought humans were animals had come to take them away. Constantine stepped forward to the microphone. Commander Vex High, this is John Constantine. I'm speaking for the colony. We dispute your claim. Laughter echoed from the ships above. You dispute? You are cattle human. Cattle do not dispute. According to the Zephyrian Honor Code, any being claimed as property has the right to challenge that claim through trial by combat, Constantine said clearly. I invoke that right. The laughter stopped. There was a long silence before Commander Vex High spoke again, and this time his voice was different, more serious. You know of the Honor Code? I do. I challenge your claim to these people. If your champion defeats me, we surrender without resistance. If I win, you leave this colony alone forever. Kyle stared at Constantine in shock. The man was calmly offering to fight an alien warrior in single combat. It was insane. Zephyrians were twice the size of humans and had natural armor. They had been bred for war for thousands of years. You would die for these people? Commander Vex High asked. If necessary, Constantine replied simply. Another long pause. Then the commander spoke again, and Kyle could hear amusement in his voice. Very well, human. We accept your challenge. It has been many years since we had proper entertainment. You will face Carthuan the Bonebreaker at dawn tomorrow. The combat will be to the death. Agreed, Constantine said. The connection cut off, leaving the plaza in stunned silence. Kyle felt like he was in a dream. This could not be real. Constantine could not actually be planning to fight a Zephyrian champion. Governor Chun grabbed Constantine's arm. Are you insane? You just signed your own death warrant. Maybe, Constantine said calmly. But I also bought us a night to prepare. And I gave these people something they didn't have before. What's that? She demanded. A chance. The crowd began to break up, people talking in small groups about what they had just witnessed. Some were calling Constantine a hero. Others were saying he was a fool who had just made things worse. Kyle stayed near the platform, watching Constantine. The man was talking quietly with Governor Chun and her advisors, discussing details of the challenge. He seemed completely relaxed, as if he had not just volunteered to fight an alien killing machine. Finally, Constantine noticed Kyle standing there. You have questions, he said. Why? Kyle asked. Why would you do this? You don't even know these people. Constantine sat down on the edge of the platform, so he was at Kyle's eye level. Remember what we were talking about before the ships arrived? About feeling angry at the world? Kyle nodded. I spent years being angry about bullies who picked on people weaker than themselves, corporate raiders who stole from farmers, governments that ignored suffering because it was not profitable to care. But anger by itself doesn't change anything. So what does? Kyle asked. Action. Standing up when someone needs to be stood up for. Fighting when someone needs to be fought for. Constantine looked up at the alien ships hovering overhead. These Zephyrians think humans are weak because we're smaller than they are. They think we don't matter because we don't have their technology or their natural weapons. But we are weaker. Kyle said. That's just the truth. Constantine smiled. Physical strength is just one kind of strength. Kyle, there's also courage, determination, the willingness to sacrifice yourself for others, the refusal to give up even when the odds are impossible. Kyle looked at the alien ships again. They were so big, so threatening. You really think you can beat their champion? I think I have to try, Constantine said. Because if I don't, these people will spend the rest of their lives as slaves. And that's not acceptable. But what if you lose? Constantine stood up and put his hand on Kyle's shoulder again. Then at least I'll have shown them that humans don't go quietly. That we're not the cattle they think we are. Sometimes that's enough to plant a seed of doubt. And doubt can grow into something bigger. Kyle wanted to argue, to point out all the ways this plan could go wrong. But looking at Constantine's calm, determined face, He found himself believing that maybe, just maybe, this crazy plan might actually work. After all, this was John Constantine, the man who had given up everything to help people like Kyle's family. If anyone could find a way to beat impossible odds, it would be him. The dog that Constantine had rescued earlier came trotting up to them, tail wagging. Constantine knelt down and scratched behind its ears. "At least someone's having a good day," he said with a smile. Kyle realized that despite everything, he was starting to smile too. The night passed slowly for everyone in New Terra Colony. Kyle could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw images of Constantine fighting some terrible alien monster. He kept thinking about what would happen if Constantine lost. All of them would become slaves, shipped off to mines or fighting rings in distant star systems. He finally gave up trying to sleep around 4 in the morning. He dressed quietly and slipped out of the family housing unit. His parents were still asleep, but he had heard them talking in worried whispers until very late. The colony felt different in the pre-dawn darkness. The usual sounds of machinery and air recyclers seemed louder. The alien ships still hung in the sky like metal storm clouds, their running lights blinking red and green. Kyle shivered and pulled his jacket tighter. He was not the only one who could not sleep. Small groups of colonists wandered the streets, talking in quiet voices. Some were praying. Others were making plans for what they would do if Constantine lost. A few were even talking about trying to run. Though everyone knew there was nowhere to go, Kyle found himself walking toward the main plaza without really deciding to. When he got there, he saw that he was not alone. Constantine was there too, sitting on a bench near the fountain. The dog was curled up at his feet, finally looking peaceful. "Couldn't sleep either?" Constantine asked when he noticed Kyle approaching. Kyle shook his head and sat down on the other end of the bench. "Are you scared?" "Terrified," Constantine said simply. The honest answer surprised Kyle. He had expected Constantine to say something brave about not being afraid. "Then why are you doing this?" Constantine was quiet for a moment, looking up at the alien ships. "Do you know what the worst part about being angry at the world is, Kyle?" "What?" "It's when you realize that your anger is not going to change anything. When you understand that the bullies are going to keep winning and good people are going to keep suffering and there's nothing you can do about it." Constantine reached down and petted the dog. "That's when a lot of people give up. They decide that since they can't fix everything, they won't try to fix anything." Kyle thought about his family's farm, about how helpless he had felt when the corporation took it away. "But you didn't give up." "No, I didn't. Because I learned something important. You don't have to fix everything to make a difference. You just have to fix what's in front of you. One person at a time, one problem at a time. But this is bigger than one problem," Kyle said. "This is a whole alien empire." Constantine smiled. "Today it is. But it started with one Zephyrian commander who thinks humans are cattle. If I can change his mind, maybe that spreads to others. Maybe eventually, the whole empire starts to see us differently." A new sound echoed across the plaza. Heavy footsteps, getting closer. Kyle turned to see Governor Chun approaching with several other colonists. Behind them came more people, until there was a small crowd gathered around the bench. "Mr. Constantine," Governor Chun said formally, "the Zephyrians have sent down more details about the combat. I thought you should know what you're facing." She handed him a data pad. Constantine read it carefully, his expression growing more serious with each line. "How bad is it?" Kyle asked. "Cthulhu the Bonebreaker." Constantine read aloud. 53 victories in formal combat, no defeats. 8 feet tall, natural chitinous armor, enhanced reflexes. He looked up from the pad. "He's killed opponents from 12 different species." An old woman in the crowd spoke up. "It's not too late to change your mind. We could try to run instead." "Run where?" Constantine asked gently. Their ships are. Faster than anything we have. And even if some of us escaped, they'd hunt us down eventually. This is the only chance we have." Kyle stared at the datapad, trying to imagine fighting something that had never lost a battle. "Is there any way you can win?" Constantine stood up and stretched. "There's always a way. It might not be obvious, and it might not be easy, but there's always a way." He looked around at the crowd of colonists. "The thing is, I'm not really fighting for myself. I'm fighting for all of you. And when you're fighting for something bigger than yourself, you find strength you didn't know you had." "But what if it's not enough?" Kyle asked. "Then at least we'll have tried," Constantine said. "And sometimes trying is the most important thing. It shows that we refuse to be victims. It shows that we believe we're worth fighting for." The crowd began to break up as people went to prepare for the day ahead. The combat would begin at dawn, which was still 2 hours away. Kyle stayed on the bench with Constantine and the dog. "Can I ask you something?" Kyle said, "Of course." "Why did you help me yesterday? With the dog, I mean. You didn't know me. You could have just walked away." Constantine considered the question, "Because that's who I choose to be. Someone who helps when he can. Someone who stands up for those who can't stand up for themselves." He looked at Kyle seriously, "Just like you're going to do someday." "Me?" Kyle laughed bitterly. "I'm nobody. I'm just a kid whose family lost everything. You think I was born knowing how to help people? You think I never made mistakes or hurt someone when I was angry?" Constantine shook his head. "I was probably worse than you at your age. The difference is that I learned from my mistakes instead of letting them define me." Kyle thought about kicking the dog, about how angry he had been, how much he had wanted to hurt something innocent just because he was hurting. "I'm sorry about yesterday, with the dog." "Don't apologize to me," Constantine said. "Apologize to him." He nodded toward the dog, who was now awake and watching them with bright, alert eyes. Kyle knelt down and carefully reached out his hand. The dog sniffed it cautiously, then licked his fingers. "I'm sorry," Kyle whispered. "I was angry, but that's no excuse for hurting you." The dog's tail wagged, and Kyle felt something inside his chest loosen. The anger that had been eating at him for months was still there, but it felt different now. Smaller, more manageable. "How do you do it?" Kyle asked Constantine. "How do you stay calm when everything is falling apart?" "Practice," Constantine said simply. "And remembering that even when everything seems hopeless, there are still good things worth protecting. Like a stray dog who still trusts humans even after being kicked. Like colonists who stick together when aliens threaten them. Like a young man who's learning that his anger doesn't have to control his actions." The eastern horizon was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming, and with it the most important fight of Constantine's life. Kyle looked at the man who had volunteered to die for people he barely knew, and felt something he had not felt in months. Pride. Not in himself, but in being human. In belonging to a species that could produce someone like John Constantine. Someone who would face impossible odds, just because it was the right thing to do. "I want to watch," Kyle said. "When you fight, I want to be there." Constantine nodded. "I'd like that. It helps to know that someone believes in you." "I do believe in you," Kyle said, and meant it completely. The dog barked once, as if agreeing. Constantine smiled and stood up, ready to face whatever came next. The sun rose red over New Terra Colony, painting the sky the color of blood. Kyle stood with the crowd of colonists in the main plaza, watching as the Zephyrians prepared their fighting arena. They had used some kind of energy field to create a large circle in the center of the plaza. Nothing could get in or out once the fight began. A transport ship descended from one of the battle cruisers, landing with a heavy thud that shook the ground. The cargo doors opened with a hiss of escaping air, and Kyle got his first look at real Zephyrians. They were even more frightening than the stories had made them sound. 3 of them walked out of the ship, each one nearly 8 feet tall and covered in thick, dark armor that looked like it had grown from their skin. Their faces were hard and angular, with glowing yellow eyes that seemed to look right through the humans watching them. The largest, Zephyrian, carried himself differently than the others. Where they walked with military precision, he moved like a predator. Every step was smooth and controlled, as if he was always ready to attack. This had to be Carthuan the Bonebreaker. Commander Vex High was the second Zephyrian. He wore more decorations on his armor and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. The third alien seemed to be some kind of judge or referee. "Humans," Commander Vex High's voice boomed across the plaza. "Bring forward your champion." Constantine stepped out of the crowd. He had changed into simple fighting clothes, dark pants and a plain shirt. He carried no weapons. Next to the massive Zephyrians, he looked impossibly small and fragile. Kyle felt his stomach twist with fear. How could Constantine possibly win against something like Carthuan? The alien champion was twice his size and covered in natural armor. His arms were as thick as Constantine's legs. Constantine walked to the center of the arena and stopped. He looked calm, almost peaceful. The dog followed him partway, then sat down at the edge of the energy field and waited. Carthuan entered the arena from the other side. Up close, he was even more terrifying. His armor had scars and scratches from dozens of previous fights. His claws were as long as kitchen knives and looked sharp enough to cut through steel. "I am Carthuan," the alien champion said in heavily accented English. "I have killed 53 opponents in formal combat. You will be 54. Maybe," Constantine replied quietly. "Or maybe today is the day you learn that humans are more than you think we are." Carthuan laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "You are cattle. Weak, soft cattle. This will be over quickly." The Zephyrian judge raised his hand. "The challenge is formal. Combat to the death. No weapons except natural abilities. Begin when I drop my hand." Kyle held his breath. Around him, the other colonists were silent. Even the children had stopped making noise. Everyone was watching. The two fighters in the center of the arena thought the judge's hand fell. Carthuan charged immediately, moving faster than something that big should have been able to move. His claws were extended, aimed straight at Constantine's chest. If they connected, the fight would be over in seconds, but Constantine was not there when the claws arrived. He had moved to the side at the last possible second, so smoothly that it looked like he had known exactly what Carthuan was going to do. The alien champion stumbled past him, off balance from his missed attack. Constantine did not try to attack while Carthuan was vulnerable. Instead, he stepped back and waited for the alien to recover. Kyle could not understand why he was not pressing his advantage. Carthuan spun around, angry now. He attacked again, this time more carefully. His claws swept in wide arcs, trying to cut Constantine in half. But Constantine seemed to flow around the attacks like water, never quite where the claws expected him to be. "Stand still and die." Carthuan roared in frustration. Constantine did not answer. He was completely focused on the fight, watching every movement, every shift in the alien's weight. Kyle began to understand what he was seeing. Constantine was not trying to overpower his opponent. He was studying him. The fight continued for several minutes. Carthuan attacked again and again, each time getting more frustrated when his claws found only air. Constantine dodged and weaved, never attacking back, just learning. Why isn't he fighting back? Someone in the crowd whispered. Kyle thought he knew. Constantine was waiting for the right moment. He was letting Carthuan tire himself out while he figured out the alien's patterns and weaknesses. Finally, Carthuan made a mistake. He put too much force into one of his attacks and left himself open for just a split second. Constantine moved. He was faster than Kyle had ever seen a human move. One moment he was dodging away from Carthuan's claws. The next he was inside the alien's guard, striking with his fist at a spot where the natural armor had a small gap. Cthulhu grunted in pain and surprise. He swung his massive arm in a backhand that would have broken Constantine's neck. But Constantine was already gone, dancing away to a safe distance. The alien champion looked down at his side, where Constantine had hit him. There was a crack in his armor, and a small trickle of dark blood was seeping out. "Impossible," Cthulhu said. "No human has ever drawn my blood." "Then I guess this is a day for new experiences," Constantine replied. Cthulhu's attitude changed. He stopped treating this as easy entertainment and began fighting seriously. His attacks became more precise, more dangerous. But Constantine had learned enough about his opponent's style to stay ahead of the deadly claws. The fight became a deadly dance. Cthulhu would attack with overwhelming force, and Constantine would slip away at the last second, occasionally, landing a quick strike at an armor gap before retreating. Each time he did a little more damage. Kyle watched in amazement. Constantine was actually winning, not through brute strength, but through skill and intelligence and an absolute refusal to give up. He was showing everyone that humans could be more than the Zephyrians thought. But Kyle could see that Constantine was getting tired. Dodging those massive claws took enormous energy, and he could not keep it up forever. Cthulhu seemed to realize this too, because he began attacking even more aggressively, trying to wear Constantine down. Constantine stumbled slightly on one dodge, and Cthulhu's claws caught his shoulder. Blood soaked through his shirt, and Kyle heard several people in the crowd gasp. "First blood to me, human," Cthulhu said. With satisfaction, Constantine looked down at his wounded shoulder, then back at his opponent. He smiled. "Thanks for showing me where your reach extends to. That's exactly what I needed to know." Before Cthulhu could react, Constantine launched himself forward in a move that defied everything Kyle understood about fighting. Instead of staying away from those deadly claws, Constantine went straight at them, ducking under Cthulhu's guard and driving his fist up toward the alien's throat. Cthulhu tried to bring his claws down, but Constantine was too close and moving too fast. The human's fist connected with precision, hitting the one spot on the alien's neck where there was no armor protection. Cthulhu made a choking sound and staggered backward. His eyes went wide with shock and something Kyle had never expected to see in a Zephyrian warrior. Fear. The mighty bone breaker, who had never lost a fight, was afraid of a human who was half his size. Constantine did not give him time to recover. He pressed his attack, striking again and again at the vulnerable spots in Cthulhu's armor. The alien tried to fight back, but he was off balance and confused. This was not how fights were supposed to go. With a final, perfectly placed strike, Constantine brought down the undefeated champion of the Zephyrian Empire. Cthulhu fell to his knees, then collapsed completely. He was still breathing, but he could not get up. The plaza erupted in cheers from the human colonists, but Kyle barely heard them. He was staring at Constantine, who stood over his defeated opponent, bleeding but victorious. A human had just accomplished the impossible. The silence in the plaza was complete. Kyle could hear his own heartbeat as he watched Constantine stand over the fallen Zephyrian champion. Cthulhu was still breathing, but he was finished. The undefeated warrior who had killed 53 opponents had been beaten by a human. Commander Vex High stared at the scene with his glowing yellow eyes. His expression was unreadable, but Kyle could see tension in the way he held his massive frame. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Finally, the Zephyrian commander stepped into the arena. He walked over to where Cthulhu lay defeated and looked down at his champion. Then he turned to Constantine. "This is impossible," Vex High said slowly. "Humans are weak. You are cattle. This cannot be real." Constantine wiped blood from his wounded shoulder and faced the commander calmly. "It's real. Your champion lost." According to your own honor code, that means you leave this colony alone, forever. Vexhai's claws extended slightly, and Kyle tensed. The commander looked angry enough to attack Constantine, despite the rules of formal combat. But after a moment, the claws retracted. The honor code will be observed, Vexhai said stiffly. You have won your freedom, humans. But do not think this changes anything. You are still weak, still inferior. Maybe, Constantine said. But we're free, and that's what matters. The Zephyrian commander helped Carthuan to his feet. The defeated champion could barely stand, but he was alive. As they moved toward their transport ship, Vexhai paused and looked back at Constantine. What are you? He asked. You fight like no human I have ever seen. I'm just someone who learned that real strength comes from protecting others, Constantine replied. And I'm not the only one. Humans are capable of much more than you think when we have something worth fighting for. Vexhai stared at him for another moment, then turned away. We will remember this day, he said as he walked toward the ship. Other species will hear of the human who defeated Carthuan. You have made your people noticed in ways that may not be good for them. Let them come, Constantine said quietly. We'll be ready. The Zephyrian transport lifted off and returned to the battle cruiser. Within an hour, all 3 alien ships had left orbit and jumped to hyperspace. New Terra Colony was free. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. People who had been terrified that morning were now laughing and dancing in the streets. Someone had found alcohol stored for emergencies, and colonists were toasting Constantine's victory. But Kyle noticed that Constantine himself was not celebrating. He sat on the same bench where they had talked before dawn, the little dog curled up beside him. He looked tired and thoughtful. Kyle walked over and sat down next to him. You did it. You actually beat him. We did it, Constantine corrected. All of us together. I just happened to be the one in the arena. But you're not happy about it, Kyle observed. Constantine sighed. I'm happy that everyone is safe. But Vexhai was right about one thing. This victory is going to attract attention. Other alien species are going to wonder about the humans who can defeat Zephyrian champions. Some of that attention might not be friendly. Kyle felt a chill. You mean more aliens might come? Probably. The galaxy is full of species that think they're better than humans. Some of them might decide to test us after hearing about today. Constantine looked at Kyle seriously. That means places like New Terra Colony need to be ready. They need people who can stand up for what's right when the time comes. People like you, Kyle said. People like you, Constantine replied. I won't always be here, Kyle. I can't be everywhere at once. But I can help prepare others to carry on the work. Kyle thought about that. What kind of work? Constantine reached down and petted the dog, who wagged his tail contentedly. Remember yesterday, when you were about to kick this little guy? You were angry and hurt, and you wanted to take it out on something weaker than you. Kyle felt ashamed. Yeah, but you stopped, and today you apologized to him. You chose to be better than your anger. Constantine looked up at the stars, where alien ships had been threatening them just hours before. That's what humans do when we're at our best. We choose to be better than our worst impulses. But what if I'm not strong enough? Kyle asked. What if I can't fight like you can? Constantine smiled. Fighting isn't the only way to be strong. You can be strong by helping people who need help, by standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves, by choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. Kyle nodded slowly. He was starting to understand. I have to leave soon, Constantine said. There are other colonies out there that might need help. Other people who need someone to show them that humans are worth more than aliens like the Zephyrians think. How soon? Kyle asked. Tomorrow morning. Governor Chun is arranging transport for me, Kyle felt sad, but not surprised. He had known that someone like Constantine would not stay in one place for long. Will I ever see you again? Maybe, but more importantly, you'll see yourself becoming the person you're meant to be. And someday, when another young person is angry and hurt and about to make a mistake, you'll be there to help them choose a better path. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the celebration continue around them. Kyle thought about everything that had happened in the past 2 days. He had gone from being an angry, bitter teenager to someone who believed that humans could accomplish incredible things when they worked together. "Constantine?" Kyle said finally. "Yes?" "Thank you for everything." Constantine put his hand on Kyle's shoulder one last time. "Thank you for reminding me why this work matters. For showing me that even someone who's been hurt can choose to help instead of harm." The next morning, Kyle woke up early to see Constantine off. The whole colony had gathered at the spaceport to say goodbye to the man who had saved them. Constantine's ship was a small, unremarkable freighter that looked like it had seen better days. As Constantine prepared to board, Kyle ran up to him. "Wait, I want to give you something." He pulled out a small wooden carving he had made during the night. It was rough and simple, but it showed a man kneeling next to a dog. "So you'll remember us," Kyle said. Constantine took the carving and studied it carefully. "This is beautiful, Kyle, thank you." "And I want you to take him too," Kyle said, nodding toward the little dog. "He likes you, and you probably get lonely traveling around space by yourself." Constantine looked down at the dog, who was sitting at his feet with his tail wagging. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, but I want to ask you to name him something good." "Huh? About Buddy?" Constantine suggested. Kyle grinned. "Perfect." Constantine picked up Buddy and carried him onto the ship. As the freighter lifted off, Kyle watched until it disappeared among the stars. Then he turned and walked back toward the colony, ready to begin the work of becoming the person Constantine believed he could be. Over the following months, Kyle threw himself into helping others. He started a program to care for the colony's animals. He helped new families settle in when they arrived. When other young people got angry or frustrated, Kyle was there to listen and offer guidance. And when the stories began to spread through human space about the colony that had defeated a Zephyrian champion, Kyle made sure everyone knew that real strength came from protecting those who needed protection. The legend of John Constantine grew with each telling, inspiring humans across the galaxy to stand up for themselves and others. But Kyle knew the real truth. Heroes were not born special. They were ordinary people who chose to do extraordinary things when the moment demanded it. And someday, when the time came, Kyle would be ready to be that kind of hero too.